Safeguarding is characteristic of God. When this synod last met, it was very soon after the publication of the Makin report into the abominable abuses of John Smythe and the subsequent resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Indeed, if you were here for that synod, you will probably recall that Archdeacon Malcolm and I sought to address those events head-on at the outset of the meeting, after which we kept a moment of silent prayer for a safer church. But since then, as Rick has reminded us, we have all been shaken by at least 3 subsequent developments, one before Christmas and 2 afterwards, the first 2 of which led to calls for the resignation of the Archbishop of York. I want to note, as Rick has just illustrated, that none of these terrible events reflect the good work being done in safeguarding at parish level. They don't reflect the quality of work being done by PSOs and volunteers in local congregations. It's really important to stress that. However, first, in December, the BBC File on 4 published its investigation into the case of David Tudor, priest in the Diocese of Chelmsford, deprived of office in October last year after a complaint made against him under the clergy discipline measure. Actually, one of the few instances I can think of the CDM doing what the CDM is really created to do. Offences relating to a complaint relating to historic sexual offences against girls under the age of 18. You will recall, and you may well share, the widespread sense of consternation that he was allowed to continue in post for so long after concerns about his behaviour first emerged. In some quarters, that consternation led to the first calls for the resignation of the Archbishop of York, who had been Bishop of Chelmsford for a decade until 2020. Then in January came the Channel 4 documentary disclosing complaints of sexual assault and sexual harassment against the Bishop of Liverpool, John Perambaleth. The documentary led swiftly to his resignation and to the revelation that one of the complainants was his colleague, the Bishop of Warrington, Bev Mason. Again, there was widespread consternation that these complaints had apparently not been addressed and resolved by proper process and as a matter of urgency. You may remember that by the time the Bishop of Liverpool resigned, the Bishop of Warrington had not been able to exercise her ministry in the Diocese of Sheffield, in the Diocese of Liverpool, for over 500 days. 500 days. Again, there were calls for the resignation of the Archbishop of York, and these intensified after Channel 4 broadcast some concerns about the meetings of the CNC, the Crown Nominations Commission, which had resulted in John Perambaleth's appointment. Finally, and again as Rick has outlined, there was the debate at General Synod, at which we debated 2 potential models of independence in safeguarding for the Church of England, called Models 3 and Model 4, because the 2 least ambitious models, Model 1 and 2, had already been rejected. Model 3, as Rick outlined, envisages the creation of an independent scrutiny body to review the management of casework in the Church of England, plus the outsourcing to a second independent body of the work currently being done by the National Safeguarding Team, while diocesan safeguarding officers and teams would remain employees of the relevant Diocesan Board of Finance, though supervised through the regional model arising from the ICSA recommendations. Whereas Model 4 envisages that DSOs and their teams would also be outsourced to an independent body together with the National Safeguarding Team. Broadly speaking, Model 3 was preferred by the safeguarding professionals within the Church of England, including our own safeguarding team, and by INIQUE, the body which is currently undertaking an audit of safeguarding in dioceses. Model 4 was strongly preferred by Professor Jay, who published her review of church safeguarding last year and who had previously chaired the ICSA inquiry, and also, importantly, by most victims and survivors. The decision of the Synod was reported with dismay on national television and radio, in print and on social media. Church of England rejects independent safeguarding was the blunt headline. Church of England lets down survivors once again. Church of England rejects option 4. The optics were undeniably horrid, and frankly, I would not be surprised if on Wednesday, the 12th of February, you were not feeling thoroughly discouraged by the whole sorry mess. The cumulative impact of these events has been deeply demoralising, and at various points over the past 4 months, I myself have felt despondent and even ashamed about the institution I serve. So the first thing I want to say this morning is that if this recent crisis has tested your loyalty to the Church of England and has made you question your place in it, I understand that. That is not an overreaction. We have repeatedly let down those who have looked to us for refuge. We have failed very publicly for at least a decade to prioritise the needs of survivors, and in the process we have brought the gospel of Jesus Christ into disrepute. We, and when I say we, I do mean especially we bishops, should hang our heads in shame. Having said that, I do want to try to provide some context. In what follows, I'm not attempting to excuse or justify anyone or anything, but I believe it may be helpful for me to clarify a few things. I want to make 2 points, one about that decision of the General Synod and one about the other 3 terrible revelations. First of all, then, the General Synod. I do understand the backlash following the vote last month. I realise that the decision we took was a further deep disappointment to most survivors at a time when they had already had their fill of disappointment. But as a matter of fact, I do also believe the decision taken at Synod offers the best path to a safer church, so I'll try to explain why. Those who reported Church rejects Model 4 could in fact equally have reported Church rejects Model 3, but no one did report it like that. Given the binary choice between Model 3 and Model 4, what Synod voted in favour of was actually 3.5 or even 3.7. We voted for Model 3 as a stepping stone towards a more thoroughly explored Model 4. You see, Model 4 has its risks. No other institution has ever outsourced its safeguarding. There is no precedent to learn from. No university, no NHS trust, no single nationwide charity, no local authority has ever tried it. And the Charity Commission, on hearing of the possibility of Model 4, reminded us, the Church of England, that if we did adopt it, the Church of England itself would still retain the governance responsibility for safeguarding. However far we outsource the operation, bishops in particular would still retain responsibility for safeguarding. And that raises some questions. What would we do if we became dissatisfied with the work of the independent safeguarding body? What if their values and goals began to diverge from those of the Christian Church? How would an independent body itself be held to account? And what would it involve to transfer 42 cathedral safeguarding teams and 42 diocesan teams into one independent employer, given that the terms and conditions of the safeguarding teams are not standard? At present, a DSO in Sheffield might not be paid the same as a DSO in Leeds any more than a diocesan secretary or a director of finance. What would 2P look like from 84 charities to one employer, 85 charities if you include the national safeguarding team? Diocesan safeguarding teams were also concerned that an independent employer might not encourage or even permit safeguarding professionals to spend a significant amount of their time supporting parishes and individual volunteers to engender a healthy safeguarding culture in a local congregation, and that their work might end up being restricted to case management alone. The rejection of Model 4 has been reported as if bishops were determined to retain control of safeguarding. I want to assure you we are not. most of us would like nothing more than to be relieved not only of control, but also of responsibility. But there's the rub. We can't relinquish the responsibility. We should not relinquish the responsibility. So we're trying to ensure that we find the model which enables us to exercise that continued responsibility well. It was for these sorts of reasons that diocesan safeguarding teams also favoured Model 3, not 4. But on the other hand, Model 3 has shortcomings. At present, there is a real unevenness of resource, performance and culture across the 42 dioceses and 42 cathedrals. Not every diocese has the same size of safeguarding team relative to the number of parishes. Not every diocese offers safeguarding training in the same way. Not every cathedral relates to its DSO, its diocesan safeguarding officer, in the same way. And we desperately need consistency and best practice across the board, and Model 4 would certainly make that achievable. So what we voted for was to get that independent scrutiny body underway right away, and to begin the process of transferring the national safeguarding team to independent employment, but not to stop there, as if Model 3 would be job done. We've also voted to explore further Option 4 and possibly multiple versions of Model 4 so that we can be satisfied before we embrace Model 4 that the benefits will truly outweigh the costs. We did not reject Model 4. We just determined, I believe wisely, that Model 4 is not yet sufficiently formed for us to adopt it with confidence. That's the General Synod, and that's my first point. Secondly, as far as the 3 scandals are concerned, and I do think they are in their different ways scandals, I do hope to God that they will prove to be a watershed in the life of our church. And although the Smythe story is atrocious, the cover-up in the 1980s utterly reprehensible, the lack of follow-through by Archbishop Justice and others in 2017 incomprehensible, lamentable, although all that is true, it seems to me that the lessons to be learned are relatively clear and the recommendations of the Makin report relatively easily implemented. I may be fooling myself about that, but I do believe it to be true. The other 2 cases, the Tudor case and the Liverpool case, are, I think, trickier. A few weeks ago, a prominent layperson in this diocese challenged me. How long is it going to take the House of Bishops to sort out safeguarding? How difficult can it be? And part of what the Tudor case in particular has shown us, and maybe also recent events in Liverpool, is that it can be very difficult indeed for this reason. The structures, systems and processes which make up the Church of England were mostly laid down organically centuries ago, and they are proving unfit for present-day culture which values rightly scrutiny, transparency and accountability. I'll say this again because it's important. The structures, systems and processes which make up the Church of England were mostly laid down organically centuries ago, and they are proving unfit for a present-day culture which rightly values scrutiny, transparency and accountability. The most obvious illustration of this, and this may even come as a surprise to some of you lay people here, is that clergy are not employees. They are office holders. As such, they're not subject to employment law. Although a legal process of pastoral reorganisation can lead to the dispossession of a priest, parish clergy cannot be made redundant in the ordinary way. They can't be sacked or be made subject to a performance management process. Clergy are simply not subject to ordinary HR. There was another debate at General Synod, as Rick has reported, which hardly surfaced in the media at all, which ended in the adoption of the new clergy conduct measure, which will in effect replace the clergy discipline measure with something more refined, much less of a blunt instrument. It's a huge step forward. Our own Archdeacon Malcolm was part of the group which had been working on it. It's a huge step forward, but it is not ordinary HR. A significant part of the problem in the Tudor case, and I suspect also in the Liverpool case, is that ordinary HR did not apply. In other words, the Church of England has an HR crisis as well as a safeguarding crisis. It may be that we will need to consider, as part of the solution to our present ills, the possibility of bringing office holder status to an end, so that clergy become employees subject to ordinary HR. Had that been the case, I do believe that the Tudor case and the Liverpool case would have been brought to a just conclusion more quickly. Again, I may be fooling myself, but I believe it to be true. Friends, in this address, I'm not seeking to excuse anyone or anything. I'm not trying to minimize offences or failings. I can assure you that I have felt personally the woes of the past 4 months keenly, and I am committed, deeply committed, to navigating the way to a genuinely safe, survivor-focused Church of England. But I am wanting to say that there is no magic switch we can flip which will get us there overnight, not even the adoption of Model 4. Independence in safeguarding will be a big part of the solution, but even that won't be the whole solution. Nothing less than a wholesale reform of our structures, systems and processes, perhaps especially in HR, will get us to where we need to be. May God help us to get there. Thank you.